So hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how 9th and 10th graders can get a head start on their college journey. So thank you for being here tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. So we're going to get started. So my name is Antonia Estrada, and I'm the program coordinator at Uprooted Academy. I'm joined tonight by Shante Lipscomb, another Uprooted Academy team member. Hi, Shante. And our guest for tonight is May Harmon from Georgetown University. I'd like to say a few words about who we are before we get started. For those of you who might not be too familiar with who we are and the work that we do. So essentially at Uprooted Academy, we want students to feel confident, courageous, and competitive when they apply to college. That's why we are ruthless in our pursuit to alleviate the anxiety and confusion around the college selection and application process. And that's why we're here today. After this evening's presentation, we'd love it if you could take a few minutes to fill out a quick survey. I promise it's really short. Your opinions and feedback are really important to us because it helps us improve future workshops. And by filling out the survey, you'll have the chance to win a $25 gift card. So besides helping us, you could win a $25 gift card. We'll wrap up the webinar with a live Q&A session. So please enter any questions you might have in the Q&A. And Ms. Harmon can answer them at the end of her presentation. So I'm going to go now and introduce May L. Hinton Harmon, who is the Associate Director in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Georgetown University. So Ms. Harmon has been in admissions for over 10 years. She graduated from a large public high school in Plano, Texas, with 862 students in her graduating class. That's a lot. During her time in admission, she has enjoyed working on multicultural and diversity programming, such as diversity fly-in programs. At Georgetown, she works closely with colleagues from the Center for Multicultural Equity and Access and the Georgetown Scholars Program. So thank you, Ms. Harmon, for being here tonight, for speaking to our students and families and educators. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you. So stop sharing. Here we go. So welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you to everybody who is in the virtual room today. It really is my pleasure to be able to share a little bit about Georgetown and kind of highly selective college admissions in general. Let me share my screen. It always takes me a quick second. Hopefully everybody can see my presentation. For as long as we've been on Zoom, you would think that I would have the Zoom sharing tab, but I worry about it every time. So again, my name is May Harmon. I'm here talking a little bit about Georgetown University as well as highly selective college admissions. I know you guys being in 9th and 10th grade, you might think, is it time to start thinking about college and where I want to go? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. We feel like it's good for students to kind of get it in their heads to think about, do you want a big school or a small school? Do you want a school that has a certain ethos? Do you want a school that's in a certain city because you think the opportunities are going to be really great? I think thinking through all those things nice and early can be really beneficial for students kind of down the path as you're trying to figure out where you want to spend 4 years of your life when you're in college. So we feel like it's great that you're thinking about these things a little bit early on. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Again, talking a little bit about Georgetown first, and then we can definitely talk about highly selective college admissions a little bit more generally as well. So at Georgetown, we really do pride ourselves on being the oldest and largest, the oldest Catholic and Jesuit school in the nation. And the reason that I like to bring that up is that I was just talking a little bit about schools with different ethos, different kind of mission statements. And so for Georgetown, being a Catholic Jesuit school means that there are certain guideposts that really kind of guide us as a community. So one of those Jesuit values that kind of guides us as a community is being men and women for others. So essentially that means that our students are really making sure that they are in service to other people, that they are being good global citizens, that they are really taking care of themselves and others as well. So we feel like that is a really, really important Jesuit value. One of the other important Jesuit values that we feel like is just really kind of spread throughout our campus is care of the whole person. So again, just like that other value that I was talking about, that really is taking care of yourself wholly and fully. So that means your mental health, that means your mental well-being, that's your physical health, that's your physical well-being, really making sure that you're taking care of your whole person. So really together, I would say that these are kind of two universal grounding concepts that really connect all of our students. And that's regardless of a student's personal faith background. We really are a school that prioritizes the free exchange of ideas and strives for a more just world. So if that's the type of community that you think you'd like to be a part of, then Georgetown might be a really, really good fit for you. If you're the type of student who really has a very strong sense of social justice, then you might really like the philosophy that we have at Georgetown. Now, moving on to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts about Georgetown. So our undergraduate population is about 7,000 students, about 1,600 in each class or so. Those numbers are slightly off if you're doing the math there, because we do have students who participate in study abroad, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So at Georgetown, we have 5 undergraduate schools. It's important to note this because when you apply to Georgetown, you do apply directly for one of these 5 undergraduate schools. So we have Georgetown College, that's our oldest and largest undergraduate school. This is where you're going to find majors like biology. This is where you find a major like Spanish. This is where you would find economics. So anything that kind of falls under arts and sciences, you would find within Georgetown College. We also have our School of Nursing. This is a great program that really is going to prepare students for the registered nurse examination. So if you're really excited about nursing, this is going to be a really good fit for you. We also have the School of Health. So essentially, there's a lot of research that's done within there. We have 3 majors: human science, global health, and healthcare management and policy. And that's really going to prepare students very, very well for being a professional within the medical field. So if you're thinking about medical school, then the School of Health is going to be a really good fit for you. We also have our School of Foreign Service, SFS, as we in the United States. So if you're really thinking about international affairs, you like the idea of being a global citizen across many different spectrums, then the School of Foreign Service might be a really, really good fit for you. Then we also have the business school, the McDonough School of Business. So essentially that is our business school. That is where you would study global business, the global economy, business fundamentals, and a lot of students really, really feel like that prepares them very, very well to go directly into any field that involves business, but also into getting an MBA if that's something that you are thinking about after your undergraduate experience. I know we're on the front end here, you're only 9th, 10th grade, but some of you might be thinking about graduate programs even after your undergraduate experience. As you can see a little bit further down on the screen there, we do offer a wide range of majors across these 5 undergraduate schools, as well as minors and certificates as well. So a lot of students at Georgetown are going to be really excited about their primary major, but a lot of students also then are going to have minors, certificates, and even double major while they're at Georgetown. Now, my next slide focuses a little bit on your actual undergraduate experience. So ratio is only about 11:1. So we feel like that really means that you're going to have an intimate experience with your professors. So a lot of one-on-one time with them, which our students really appreciate. Almost all of our classes are going to be taught by faculty members. So the people with the terminal degrees are going to be the people who are up at the front of the room at the podium lecturing to you. So they have that wonderful wealth of knowledge that they're going to bring to you. And then we also like to point out that our average class size is about 26 students, which once again talks to that intimacy. Something I like to point out every once in a while when I'm talking about the undergraduate experience at Georgetown and how close you would get with your faculty members. I like to sometimes emphasize that being in Washington, D.C., and that's where Georgetown University is located in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of professors who lecture at Georgetown. They're Georgetown professors, but they're still very plugged into their networks because it's Washington, D.C., and they can do that. So you can be a professor at Georgetown and still work, you could lecture at Georgetown and in the morning, and then you could work at the Washington Post in the afternoon, or you could be on Capitol Hill in the afternoon, or you could, have a position within the U.S. State Department where you go in and work in the morning, and then in the afternoon or the evening you're at Georgetown. And so our professors are really able to keep up their strong networks while they are professors at Georgetown, which I feel like is hugely beneficial for you as a student to be able to use those networks that your professors have. So an example that is coming to mind before her unfortunate passing pretty recently, we had former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who taught at Georgetown, and she taught up until the day she passed away. I actually hadn't realized this myself, even being part of the Georgetown community, that she had lectured at Georgetown for over 40 years. And so, during that, wide, amazing career that she had, Georgetown students were from all the connections that she had, letter of recommendations. And so I feel like our professors having those types of connections, again, hugely beneficial for you guys as students. So not to spend too much time on that, but I felt like it was just a nice little point to make when we're thinking about where you might want to go to school. Washington, D.C. has some really, really great opportunities for our students, and then also for your professors as well that they can help you with. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about research opportunities at Georgetown. As early as your first year at Georgetown, you can actually be part of research. And this is science and medical research in the more traditional sense that you might be thinking, but also humanities research that you might want to do. So maybe you're reading a book for a humanities professor and then summarizing it for them, because sometimes those professors are very, very busy and they don't have time to read every word of a book. So sometimes our students will read that for them and then summarize. So a lot of different research opportunities. They can be full year, they can be a semester, or they could even be summer opportunities. And for some schools, like the School of Foreign Service, or the business school, or within our School of Health, our global health program are going to have very school-specific programs as well for research. So it's really neat what our students are able to take advantage of. More about our location, I know I talked about it in the sense of your professors being able to stay plugged into various networks within the Washington, D.C. area, but you as a student have access to everything that Washington, D.C. has to offer. So internship opportunities, one I'll share from my personal life. Just this weekend, I was down at the Cherry Blossom Festival here in D.C., which I know is not the academic thing that most people think about when they think about all the opportunities within Washington, D.C., but it's really an amazing experience to be able to see these amazing cherry blossoms in bloom here in D.C. A lot of people come from very, very far away to take advantage of these beautiful sites. For Georgetown students, it's right there in your backyard. And so it's really, really neat, everything that you can do in the area. We have the Smithsonian, so those are the museums that you probably have heard about. We have the National Archives. We have the Kennedy Center, which is a world famous theater within the Washington, D.C. area. You can actually get discounted tickets for performances if you are a Georgetown student, and you can actually even perform there if you want to be part of performances such as for MLK Day, there's a big performance that students can be a part of. And so you can actually, if you have a good singing voice, be part of that. And so a lot of students really like taking advantage of that. I'll also point out that Georgetown is an amazing place. Washington, D.C. is an amazing place to really kind of lend your voice to, I would say, any issue that you feel strongly about. So, for example, a couple of years ago, you might have seen on TV, March for Our Lives was there was a big march in Washington, D.C. about against gun violence. And so for a lot of students across the country, people flew in to Washington, D.C. to be part of that. And for Georgetown students, they could actually just walk over to the National Mall. So that's where all those historic landmarks you've seen on TV, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the White House, and all of that, they could just walk over to that location and be part of that really historic event because it's Washington, D.C., and these amazing things happen here. So for a lot of students, they really just love all the opportunities in D.C. If I had 2 or 3 hours, I would take you through everything that you could do here, but I know we just have a few minutes. So I'm just kind of giving you the highlights there. Moving on, wanted to talk a little bit about the student body and our housing options, because we know housing, even for 9th or 10th graders, might be kind of on your mind. So first, I'm talking a little bit about the snapshot of our student body, some diversity statistics if people are interested in that. About 50%, just under that, we say 40 plus, but it's almost 50% of our students identify as students of color. About 12% or so, it's not a quota that we're trying to get at by any stretch, but just that's how it works out with our student body each year. About 12% of our students are first generation to college. We feel like it's really an important group. We want to make sure that we are very supportive. If once again, if we had a little bit more time, I would talk more about the programming that we have to support first generation students to campus. Just really quickly, in case you want to look these up, we have the Georgetown Scholars Program and we have the Community Scholars Support Programs. Just go ahead and jot those down, but essentially they are great programs to build community around first generation college students, students who are really excelling academically within their own school, but maybe just want a little bit of extra support transitioning into Georgetown. So again, Community Scholars and the Georgetown Scholars Program. We have students from all 50 states at Georgetown. That's something we really pride ourselves on, having geographic diversity. We feel like it's really important for you to I know that there are people from North Dakota, if you've never met somebody from North Dakota, as well as, from Florida. And so it's really neat to see folks, be roommates with somebody who came from a completely different state or a different country from them, because about 9 to 10% of our students are usually from outside the United States, so international students as well. So we feel like that's really, really neat. In terms of our residential housing options, we do have a 3-year on-campus living requirement. So if you're at Georgetown, then you essentially would live on campus for 3 years, and then you would live off campus for 1 year. We do say that about 87% of students live on campus, just kind of emphasizing that we are a very residential campus at Georgetown. Now, I want to talk a little bit about admissions and financial aid. This is applicable for Georgetown, but in a minute, I'm going to talk about highly selective college admissions. And these, I would say these are important things to think about with whatever school you're applying to. You want to think, is the school need blind in their admissions approach, or are they need aware? And I'm sure you guys will go over all of these pieces and the differences between them. But talking about Georgetown, we are a need blind admissions policy school. Essentially, that means that when you apply to Georgetown, we do not factor in your financial aid status. And I know a lot of students think, is that really true? I heard, if you, have, if you're very wealthy, it might be easier to get into college. And I will say any school that says that they are need blind, that really is what we mean. We mean that we don't factor in your financial aid status. We are just trying to find the students who we feel are the best fit for Georgetown. So we are focused on your essays, how well you write. We are focused on your academic transcript. We are focused on all these other pieces that we feel like are just going to make you your activities that we feel like are just going to make you really great on our campus. Are you going to be a good friend? Are you going to be a good roommate? Are you going to be a good classmate? Those are really the factors that we're looking for when we're looking at students, more so than focusing on whether or not your family has enough money to pay for the tuition. We have financial aid, and we are happy to give that out for students who need that. We meet 100% of demonstrated student or family need, and that's for all U.S. citizens, permanent residents, undocumented, and DACA students. So again, we feel like financial aid is really important, and we never want it to be a barrier to somebody coming to Georgetown. We also do have application fee waivers. I feel like this is something that's not talked about as much in the mainstream, and I wish that it was, because there's no problem with applying for an application fee waiver. If you're thinking, I like Georgetown, but I don't know if I want to pay the application fee for Georgetown at $75, it's perfectly fine to just go ahead and request an application fee waiver. It will have zero impact no impact on your application review. That's not going to matter at all to us when reviewing your application. It's not something we look at and think, oh, I can't believe a student applied for an application fee waiver, anything like that. We really just want you to apply. We want to read your essays. We want to see your activities list. We want to see your academic transcript. It does not matter to us at all if you apply for an application fee waiver. So I just wanted to note that for everybody. A couple of highlights from financial aid. So essentially at Georgetown, there could be a small loan and or work study in your financial aid package. It wouldn't be more than $6,500, and you could get a Georgetown grant or scholarship. So this is money that does not have to be paid back to the university, and that would be possibly over $70,000. Essentially, again, we want financial aid to be robust. We don't want any student not to attend Georgetown because of financial aid. So talking a little bit about highly selective college admissions in general, I just wanted to share a couple of takeaways about this. Holistic admissions, I kind of touched on this a minute ago when I was talking about we want to read your essays and we want to look at your activities lists and we want to look at your academic transcript. We like taking all of these pieces into consideration when we're viewing your application. We want to really see, how you are as a student within your school. That's why we like having letters of recommendation. So for Georgetown and most schools that you're applying to, you'll probably get a letter of recommendation from your high school counselor, and then at least 1 or 2 letters of recommendation from teachers. Usually the request will be that these be from 11th grade within your high school, sometimes 12th grade. If you really have an amazing teacher from your sophomore year, you 10th graders right now, you're in a class with a teacher and you just know that you're going to want them to write that letter, that's usually okay as well, but definitely check with the individual school. For Georgetown, that's perfectly fine with us. So again, with holistic admissions, we're really looking at you as the whole person. We really want to get to know you across all of these different pieces of your application. And the reason that we want to do all of this is that we really want to make sure that we're finding the best students that we can for Georgetown. Now, this contextual review piece, we feel like it's important to note that because maybe you have circumstances in your background that are worth letting us know context around your application. So, for example, maybe during your sophomore year, your grades dipped a little bit because a very close relative was diagnosed with cancer. And so you were helping out a lot, driving around maybe your siblings, or you were helping get that relative to the hospital or something along those lines. And so your grades dipped a little bit because of that. That is contextual information that is very, very important for us to know. So when we're looking at your transcript, we know that, okay, that makes sense that there was a little grade dip there because, this student was helping out so much with the family during that time period. So that's really, really helpful for us to know. It's helpful for us to know if there are family background or family circumstances that we need to know about. And whatever that is, we highly, highly recommend that you share it with your high school counselor if you feel comfortable. And then they can definitely let us know what those circumstances are. Or for Georgetown and other highly selective schools, feel free to write it in additional information sections. But if there is anything that you want us to know, make sure that you do share that with us. Of course, the admissions process is confidential, so you can feel confident if you share that information with us. We will keep that confidential, just within our office, that information. I want to talk a little bit about self-presentation because I feel like this is mentioned whenever, I'd say pretty much whenever anybody gives you advice about essays, but really making sure that it is something that is important to us as admissions officers for us to get to know your genuine voice. And we mean that when you're writing your essays, that we really want to know about you. We want to learn about you, whatever your story is, that really is important to us to be able to to know you. When we're done reading an essay, I feel like we always think, did I get to know the student through that essay? You know, what came out that was unique, that was different, that was interesting about the student from that essay. And we like to emphasize this because a lot of students do think, I'm going to write about my aunt who was, you know, really, really amazing for this reason, or, you know, my dad because he's a great guy for this reason. And really, we emphasize to you that we want to learn about you. It's always nice to hear about aunt or dad. Of course, that's lovely. You know, when we think, oh, we'd love to admit aunt or dad, but really, you know, our main focus is getting to know you through the essay. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'm happy to talk more about that when we do the question and answer. Fit is also very important. You know, I talked a little bit in the beginning about Georgetown and our mission statement to be to really educate global citizens. I talked about our Jesuit values about being men and women for others and care of the whole person, and that really is something that's important to Georgetown. I would say our staff, our students, our faculty, and so if that's something again that sounds great to you, then that would be great to have you apply to Georgetown. But if it's something that maybe for some reason you don't like that mission statement, then of course you should find a school in which you really feel like you are going to fit the best. Maybe you really want a large public university with big, you know, sports games, and you know that's just really what you're hoping for. Then we say that's perfectly fine. There are a lot of colleges and universities out there, and so it's really important that you find the one that really fits you the best, or a handful that really you think would fit you the best. So we feel like that fit piece is pretty important. Now, a little bit more about the holistic and contextual pieces that go into us reviewing applications as a highly selective institution. And this is pretty broad across all highly selective schools. We're going to look at your transcripts. So essentially, we want to see the courses that you've taken and the rigor that you have you challenge yourself with. The reason that we like to put it out there like that, challenging coursework and the grades that you've received, is because a lot of students think it's more about the GPA. I have a 4.5 GPA. Will that get me into Georgetown? Will that get me in Harvard? You know, what can I do with that GPA? And we really like to emphasize it's the courses and the grades that you've received, because across the almost 37,000 high schools out there in the United States alone, a 4-point GPA could be really good at one school, or it could be the bottom half of the class at another school. So we never really want students to focus just on what the GPA is. It's more important the courses you've taken and the grades that you've actually received in those courses. We, of course, want you to challenge yourself with rigor to the best of your ability in the courses that you're taking. And so I just wanted to emphasize that a little bit more, since you guys are 9th and 10th graders, you're a little bit younger, you still have a lot of coursework to go to make sure that you are taking the most rigorous courses that you feel you can do well in. We look at grade trends. So essentially, we want to see that you are steadily progressing. If maybe your 9th grade, your grades have been not as strong, we definitely want to see that upward trend in grades, that you are doing progressively better in your courses. Or, you know, if you're doing well now, we want to see that you are continuing to do well in your coursework. The reason that we look at all these pieces is that it helps us deduce that you're academically ready for Georgetown or a highly selective institution. Obviously, when we admit students, we want to admit those students that we feel are going to do academically, socially, all these pieces do well at Georgetown. And then the last piece here that I think is really important is that we do see you within the context of your high school. So a lot of students will ask questions around, my high school doesn't offer many AP courses, advanced placement courses. So, you know, how will I be compared to somebody who goes to a high school where there are 20 AP courses offered? You know, what will that look like for me? Will I be at a disadvantage because my school only offers 3? And so we say, of course, you will not be at a disadvantage if your school only offers 3 AP courses and you've taken those 3, then we call that maxing the rigor within your schools. So essentially that means we would say, wow, you know, they're only taken, and that's really impressive, with a point to make sure that we're emphasizing to students to really make sure that you that you know that we know what's offered at your high school. Really quickly, just to kind of wrap that thought up, back to college school profile, we will know how many AP advanced placement courses, how many honors courses, how many international baccalaureate courses, how many dual enrollment opportunities are available within your school. So we'll know all that information, and that's how we get that school context. So just in case you weren't aware of that. And for students out there who are kind of curious what's on the school profile, you can always ask your high school counselor to see what's actually on the school profile. If you go into their office, they're usually happy to provide that information to you. I will touch on testing here. I haven't talked too much about it, but I know it's on a lot of students' minds. I will say it's usually the least favorite part of the application for any admissions officer. We just feel like it's a universal standard metric that can be helpful across evaluating, as I said, about 37,000 high schools in the United States alone. Obviously, a much larger number when you look worldwide at students. And so we do feel like it's a universal measure. It's essentially a way for you to show us that you have kind of the basic academic preparation for college. This is the SAT or the ACT. We know that many schools have gone test optional, either recently, in the past, gone test optional. Some schools are continuing to do that. Other schools are reverting back to using testing. For Georgetown, we've actually always kept the SAT and ACT requirement even through the pandemic, because we really do feel like these standardized tests are just important to making sure that students do have that mastery across the board. So even though we know testing can be a little daunting for many students, please know that one of the reasons that we have admissions officers is that we can actually read application files. So just like we will take your courses and your grades into context, we'll take your testing into context as well. So if you maybe didn't have as much preparation to take the SAT or the SAT or ACT, we will take that into consideration when reviewing your application. We wouldn't expect you to possibly score as high as somebody who was able to take a lot of test prep courses and then take the standardized testing. So again, this is all going to be within context when we review your application. So I touched a little bit on letters of recommendation earlier, but just to unpack that a little bit more, again, we're looking for a counselor recommendation and then possibly two, definitely one teacher recommendation. And this is just to understand how you are within your school community. So you're that student who stays after class to help your teachers, to help your counselors clean up their classrooms or their offices, or do you always volunteer to help out in various ways? Or you're that student who is a little bit quiet usually in class, but when you do speak, you always have a really cogent argument. Everybody sits up and pays attention when you speak. We're just trying to get a better sense of how you're viewed within your school, within your classroom context. So those letters of recommendation are hugely, hugely helpful for us as admissions officers. Now, of course, pay attention to each school because they might have slightly different requirements on what they're looking for within the teacher recommendation. And some schools will allow you to submit an optional letter of recommendation and other schools will not. When it comes to optional letters of recommendation, make sure that the person who might be submitting that is going to tell us something very different than the counselor and teachers that we already have. Some students think, well, if I have 15 letters of recommendation, that'll show that I'm really well liked within the community. And we definitely say there's no reason to send a lot of letters that are essentially going to say the same thing about you. So definitely be intentional if you do ask for an optional additional letter of recommendation. Also, some schools will be able to offer an interview. So Georgetown, we are very, very lucky that we have a very strong alumni network of interviewers. And so we do actually require the interview for all students applying to Georgetown. We feel like it's a great way to be able to get to know you on a more personal level, you talking one-on-one with an interviewer. It's a way for us to get to know you better in an actual kind of live context when we get the interview report. And we feel like it's a great way for you to get to know Georgetown better, because then you can talk to the interviewer, you guys can have a conversation, you can ask questions to a live person. We feel like that's really important. So we love that interview piece as part of the Georgetown application. Other schools also might possibly offer the interview. It does vary a little bit by school. Some will be virtual in light of the pandemic. And so we just feel like that is a really, really great way for students to get to know a school and then vice versa as well. So I want to talk a little bit about extracurricular activities because I feel like this is really where we get to know, we get to kind of envision how you're going to be on our campus. What are you really active with? What are some things that you like to do with your time? We can kind of get a sense of how you'll spend your time on our campus. So some kind of fun clubs at Georgetown. We have, I feel like the ones that I think are really great are all food related. But we have an avocado club. We have the Georgetown Grilling Society, which is really exciting. It's March in DC, so the weather is heating up, and so the Grilling Society is going to be back on Friday. Yay! And so there are just some really, really cool clubs that I feel like our students like to get involved in. I just found out there's a martial arts club, and somebody was really excited telling me about all of that just the other day. So a lot of different clubs at Georgetown. And so whatever you're doing in high school, it's possible you could continue on with that at Georgetown, or a lot of my peer schools are the same as well. If maybe you want to start your own new club, you're able to do that at Georgetown and also my peer schools. So it's really, really neat for us to hear more about what you're doing with your time while you're in high school, so we can kind of envision how you'll be at Georgetown. I'll also point out here that work and family responsibilities are definitely extracurricular activities as well. So if you spend many hours per week babysitting a younger sibling, or you take care of your grandmother, whatever your family responsibilities are, make sure you list those on your activities list. I know some students think that's not really an activity, and whatnot. It absolutely is. We just want to know how you spend your time. So it's really important to us to get that full context of you. So if that's something that's relevant for you, make sure you list that for us. We always like to kind of emphasize that your impact on an activity is really important as well. So more so than just how many hours you've spent on it, what was the impact that the activities had on you? So I feel like this is especially relevant when talking about volunteer work. It's not just how many hours you spent at maybe the soup kitchen or wherever you might be volunteering, if that's something that you do. We want to know more about the impact that experience has had on you. And pretty much Georgetown, my peer schools, they're all going to have spaces where you can tell us more about that impact. Now, I touched on the essays just briefly before, but just to kind of emphasize a little bit more how important this is, your writing really tells us a lot about who you are as a person. So we talked about that genuine voice, your authentic voice, and that really does come out in the essays. It's how we get to know what excites you, what's meaningful to you. We get to hear about your story, and it's really something that all of us as admissions officers love reading because we really do get to know you. Some schools will ask for a supplemental essay. So essentially what we're looking for in those essays is for you to tell us more about why you would be a good fit for our school. So you want to be as specific as possible. So already in this presentation, I talked about with Georgetown that we love our location in Washington, D.C., lots of things to do, lots of experiences to have. I talked about our Jesuit values. We feel like that's really, really important. I talked about a couple of professors that we have and their roles at Georgetown, and their connections and whatnot. So if you were writing an essay about Georgetown, you could kind of emphasize our location. You could talk about how you feel like you are a good fit for our Jesuit values, our Jesuit identity. And then maybe you could mention a professor or a class specific to Georgetown that you really feel like you're excited about, something that you'd really like to take. So that would be very specific to Georgetown. What we're hoping students will avoid is writing an essay where you could essentially copy and paste a different school name into the essay, and it would be exactly the same. So if you said, I want to go to Georgetown because of the world-class faculty, the beautiful campus, and the great location. That's not really that specific, right? That could also be about Stanford. That could also be about Harvard. That could also be about University of Chicago, right? They all have great campuses. They all have great faculty. They all have good locations. And so you definitely want to dig a little bit deeper and not feel like you can just copy and paste, a couple of different schools. And so we really want to make sure that you that you're very specific in that. I know that some schools have kept their COVID prompts, so I kept it in for this presentation. So if a school does ask you to talk a little bit more about the impact that COVID has had on your education, then you are more than welcome to provide that information into your application. So that's of course up to you. So wanted to just go ahead and wrap things up because I know we wanted to have some time for Q&A, question and answer. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen here if I'm able to do that, so everybody can see the original here. There we go. Wonderful. Great. Thank you guys so much for listening and hopefully learning a little bit more about Georgetown and highly selective college admissions. As I said, definitely wanted to leave time for your questions, whatever is on your mind. If it's about Georgetown, if it's about highly selective college admissions at all, or in general, or kind of whatever is on your mind.
Well, thank you so much, May. As people start thinking about what questions they want to ask, we do have one question in the chat. So the question was, what is the best way for athletes to show other involvement when their time is evenly divided between school and club or school sports?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a great question. And I would say that it probably is a little different between difference between a student being a recruited athlete, because we do know that would be a very, very high level of involvement in your sport. And then you would be coming to Georgetown or whatever school that you're applying to, most likely for that sport. So if that's the case, then absolutely perfectly fine to really talk quite a bit about that sport and your passion for it. That's perfectly fine. If you're thinking maybe you'll compete more at a non-varsity level, so club, recreational, intramural sport, then we probably would like to hear about other activities, other things that would be exciting for you on campus. So essentially showing your involvement would be in your activities list, listing out the other clubs and activities that you're part of. So every school, I didn't talk about this too much, but Georgetown is actually not on the Common Application. We have our own unique application. We actually feel like that's hugely beneficial to get to know you guys as students, and a whole host of reasons. Feel free to ask in the chat if you want me to talk a little bit more about why we're not on the Common Application. But the Georgetown application, the Universal application, the Common application, the Coalition application, all have places for you to list all of your activities out. So that's the best way to really kind of show your involvement. If you are an athlete, but you're also, captain or president of the cooking club at your school, or you also, are very involved in volunteering with your church, you can put all of that in your activities list. And then I'll say again, of course, any family responsibilities that you have, we want to hear about that as well. That's a way to show your involvement with your family, as well as your school, your community, kind of thinking outside the box there.
Just touching on that subject on extracurriculars. So for the 9th and 10th graders who are maybe exploring, trying out different activities, how do you suggest maybe helping them narrow it down? Some might try to do too much. Some might not find anything that really, sparks their interest. So what recommendations can you give?
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely want to find activities that you are actually passionate about. Sometimes I will get a student who will say, well, how many volunteer hours do I need? And I say, if you don't want to volunteer that much, that's perfectly fine. Maybe your passion is in something else, and that's perfectly fine with us as admissions officers. You might hear from other people who are not admissions officers who say, you have to do this. You have to play a sport. You have to play an instrument. You have to have this number of volunteer hours. And that's nothing, that's something that you would not hear for an admissions officer, the people who actually review your application and would be in charge of your admission decision. So one way that we describe it is some students are well-rounded, which you hear people say, oh, a well-rounded student, or a well-rounded, person. Or we say a student is pointy, that they really are focused on one point. They really, have one activity that they're really, really involved in. And being a pointy student is absolutely fine. As I was just talking about with athletes, if you're a volleyball player and that's what you're coming to Georgetown or to Yale, to do, and that's volleyball, that's perfectly fine with us. It's okay to be pointy. So I would really say you want to find that thing that you're actually passionate about and really just, focus your energy on that if that's something that makes you happy. I also feel like it's important that students not do too much just for the college application, because if you're not admitted, you would never want to think back to your high school experience and think, well, for 4 years I did all of these things, to get into, selective college B, and it didn't work out, and so we just don't want to make a student feel like there are certain things that they have to do for the college resume. It's really be true to yourself. If robotics is your passion, that's perfectly fine with us. If magic is your passion, that's great. Get excited about that and start a magic club at your school if that, is what you're excited about. That's really, I feel like, the most important thing.
There's another question also sort of kind of related to extracurriculars. What do you recommend students do if they don't have many volunteer hours due to a job?
Absolutely. And we do see that. So, students who work at their local grocery store 20 hours a week, in addition to going to school, that would be perfectly understandable that you wouldn't have as many extracurricular activities through the school or in your community because of your job. That is completely understandable. It's not something that we would penalize you for by any stretch. You just have to make sure that you tell us that. Make sure that also you let us know how many hours you're working, because if you are working 20 hours, I saw a student the other day who was working 35 hours a week, which is a lot. That is almost a full-time job. So every Saturday and Sunday they were working the max hours they could, and then as much as they could during the weekdays as well. And so absolutely, you need to tell us that information so that we know that's how you are using your time. And usually that's something that admissions officers find really admirable. Maybe you're helping out your family by having that job. So you're contributing to the household. That's perfectly fine if that's how you're spending your time. And then maybe you don't have as many volunteer hours or you don't have as many other clubs that you're part of. I would also recommend that you tell your high school guidance counselor about that. Again, kind of going back to that letter of recommendation that your high school guidance counselor is going to write for you. I feel like it's important for them to know also how you spend your time. So usually they like to include that in their letter. They'll let us know Sally Smith works, this number of hours, at, the local Subway, restaurant. And that's why she hasn't been able to take advantage of as many extracurricular activities within the school. So if you're comfortable sharing that information and the reasons that you have a job with your high school counselor, I would highly, highly recommend that.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned letters of recommendation. Also, being in 9th and 10th grade, you know that you're going to have to ask for those letters of recommendation. So get to know your counselor, get to know your teachers, because you'll need to start building those relationships if you don't. Would you advise students then to think about that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing I also want to ask is, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A. Course selection, because I know that's obviously courses, as you said, is one of the most in course rigor, one of the most important things you look at. So as 9th and 10th graders who still have a few years of coursework ahead of them, what do you recommend if, for example, they're interested in the School of Nursing or they're interested in business? Or they're interested in the liberal arts? How do you evaluate then students applying for those different majors or fields, how do you evaluate the courses that they've taken? Do you look for something in particular, or do you just as long as they've taken the most challenging courses available to them?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a little bit school specific. So for Georgetown, we do admit by school and sometimes then by major. So when we are evaluating a student who is applying to Georgetown College for the biology major, we're looking for a very strong math and science curriculum. So this is essentially that you've taken, once again, within the context of your high school, the most challenging math and science courses, and that you've done well in those courses. I like to use biology as an example because we do have a lot of students who think biology is kind of the best way to being a doctor, and I might want to be a doctor because a doctor helped me, at some point with a medical issue, and that's why I'm thinking about that field. But you also have to think: have I taken the most challenging coursework available in math and science, and are those my highest grades? Is that where I have academically excelled? Is that where I think my strength is? And so I always like to give that as an example. When we are evaluating students for our business school, we are going to look at the quantitative courses you've taken, so your math courses. Again, there for the business school, because if you're part of the business program, you're going to be taking accounting and finance courses, all courses where you're going to need really strong quantitative skills. So you'd be thinking, have I taken a calculus course? And how did I do in that course? So that I'm showing the admissions committee that I am a very strong quantitative student. I'm a very strong math student. So it does vary a little bit by the school that you're applying to when it comes to Georgetown. And then I know some of my peer schools are the same. So if you're applying to Duke School of Nursing, you would want to, once again, have a strong math and science curriculum because the nursing program is going to be pretty heavy in those areas. If you're applying to the engineering school, I'll use Duke again, for their engineering school, they actually, once again, math and science are going to be pretty important there. So you do want to think a little bit, about the particular program that you're applying to, and then think, does my coursework really kind of line up with what that school might find that's important? And you can always ask the admissions officer for that particular school, what do you think I should be taking? What do you think I should be doing here to make myself an academically competitive, strong applicant for this particular school? You can also speak with your high school guidance counselor. I know I mentioned them a lot. Because I think they're really, really important in this process to guiding you through essentially selecting your courses. I think it's always good to set up an appointment, especially since you guys are in 9th and 10th grade, with your counselor to ask about the most challenging most challenging coursework available within your school. As I mentioned a couple of times, with just so many different high schools out there and so many different curriculum options, opportunities and whatnot. Again, advanced placement, honors, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment. You do want to ask them what they think is the most rigorous within your school. And then usually if you do have the conversation with the counselor, then when they're writing their letter of recommendation for you, they can say, I spoke with Sally Smith about her curriculum, about her course selection, and this is why we chose these courses, because we felt like it was most rigorous for what she wanted to do. General advice that any highly selective highly selective admissions officer, will tell you for any school that's highly selective. Essentially, they will tell you that you want to max out the rigor within your high school first. That's a general advice that we give to students. So essentially, if advanced placement courses, international baccalaureate, IB courses are offered at your school, we want you to max out that rigor within your school first before going into dual enrollment. Because a lot of times the dual enrollment courses do take you away from your high school campus, and you have to commute and whatnot. And we feel like usually there's a lot of great rigor within your high school. But once again, it's something you want to talk to your counselor about, to really get a sense of what's offered within your area, within your school, and get their advice on what would really be best for you as a student.
Okay, well, thank you. I think unless there are any more questions, I think that's all this has been really valuable for the younger students who still have time to make themselves a strong candidate if they're not already headed that way. And what are the important things that you as an admissions officer look at when evaluating candidates for a highly selective institution? So if you're here, if you're a 9th or 10th grader here, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, you're learning about all the different colleges available to you, how your application, which you'll be submitting still in a few years, will be evaluated and getting a head start. So again, congratulations if you're here. And so thank you, May, for joining us tonight and for giving us our UA Approved Academy family the opportunity to learn from you and from all your years of experience as an admissions officer. So thank you.
Absolutely. My
Um,
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you
wanted
guys
just-
for having me.
Yeah, I just wanted to end just to share my screen just to say yeah, just to let me see, play from current slide. Yeah, I think you can see that now. Please stay engaged with us, read our blogs for tips and tricks, come to our free events, such as the one you're attending right now, follow us on social media, and just one last thing before we end tonight. So one of our trusted partners, I wanted to mention Matriculate. So Matriculate is a national nonprofit that provides free virtual college advising to eligible high schoolers. They connect high-achieving, low-income juniors and seniors to highly trained undergraduate advisors. So if you have parents here or any educators with students in the class of 2025, juniors or seniors, Shantae will be putting the link to Matriculate's website on the chat so that you can learn more about Matriculate, this free program that it offers, and have your students apply. If you're a younger student, like a 9th or 10th grader, you can complete an interest form to join their mailing list, and they'll notify you when the application opens for your class. And as I said, parents and educators and other community members, you can nominate students. If your student isn't in the class of 2025, Matriculate will add them to their email list to receive a quarterly newsletter and update. So again, free virtual college advising. The only thing I see here is that do not have anyone with a Georgetown sweatshirt. So, but I know that many of their students, I'm sure that they have. Actually, I don't know if they probably have. Lots of students have they've sent them to Georgetown. So again, a great program. It's free. If you're a junior or senior, you can apply. If you're a younger student, you can submit an interest form, and they'll contact you when your time is ready. So again, that's it. Thank you, May, so much for joining us. Please fill out the survey. Let us know how we did. If there's anything any feedback you can give us, that would be great. And so I encourage good luck to everyone on their college application journey, whether you're a younger student or an older student. Good luck. And again, May, thank you very much. Okay, good night, everyone.